Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss the 1988 psychological thriller Pin. Also known as Pin, a Plastic Nightmare, this Canadian horror film follows a brother and sister and their bond to an anatomical medical mannequin named Pin. Directed by Sandor, David Hewlett stars as Leon, a young man that is slowly losing his grip on reality as he becomes more dependent on his relationship with Pin. Cynthia Preston is Leon's sister Ursula, a young woman fearing for Leon's sanity as she begins to develop her own romantic relationship with a former classmate. This new relationship threatens Leon and Pin's sense of security, and they will go to any length to bring Ursula back to them. Arguably belonging to the evil doll subgenre, Pin is a creatively tense and thrilling ride into madness. Pin is a film not to miss. Also joining me tonight is my special guest star, Zena Dixon. And thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Again, I'm your host, Justin Steele, and with me is my special guest star co-host, Zena Dixon. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Maintaining and keeping calm with all the craziness that's going on out there. But we were discussing about how we wanted to do Pin this week, and I think it's a lesser known movie and book, and I'm excited to talk about it, while all this madness is going on out there, we're going to have our own sanity by talking about some madness that is definitely prevalent in the movie Pin, also known as Pin, a Plastic Nightmare. So real quick, I'll say how I got into it, and then we'll find out how Zena got into it. But I'm a big fan, I am a big fan of V.C. Andrews novels like Flowers in the Attic, Heaven, the Castile series, all those. I didn't read them later on, but the initial ones that she wrote, I really loved. And for those of you that don't know, the writer of the novel Pin is Andrew Niederman, who became the ghostwriter of V.C. Andrews novels. I liked his first ones. Now these kind of gotten out there a little bit, and I just don't really care anymore about them. But I did really love what he did at first. And of course, I love the work of V.C. Andrews. But how I came into this, or how this always got stuck in my head, they don't do it a lot anymore, but back in the day, you had to sort of mail order books if they weren't like at the bookstore, and you would find that in the back of books. Well, the first copy of Flowers in the Attic I ever had, I got from a thrift store, and it was like a first edition copy, so it's been out there for a while. And in the back, it had ads for other books, and typically for authors that I think it was pocket books. So other people with that editor and all that. And one of them was for Andrew Niederman's Pin. Now, I don't know, Zena, how much you know about V.C. Andrews and stuff, but there's definitely always a lot of like incesty, brother-sister type stuff in there. And while the movie doesn't really get into it, the book also does. It's not like overtly done, but it's definitely, there's like hints of it. And on the ad, it said, brother, sister, madness, sin, now the terror will begin. And then it would have like a little thing V.C. Andrews is like, read this book. So for me, reading Flowers in the Attic, all that, it's not like I'm like pursuing incest or I want to read about incest. But I always really liked V.C. Andrews, the gothic sort of styles of those books. So I was like, well, maybe this will be like it. And I'm like, oh, brother, sister, here we go again. Now, in the book, it doesn't really, or in the movie, they don't really get into it. But in the book, it's about a brother and a sister who have this sort of, I think we'll have to figure out a term of how we want to describe Pin, but he's like a medical, mannequin, like a dummy, they'll call him. I always feel silly being like he's a dummy, but, essentially that's what he is. And, Ursula tends to like walk around naked a lot in the novel in front of Leon. And, I think like there's a scene, and I know we're going to talk about it, where the nurse in it, she has her own little need. And I'll tell you a funny story about the need in a moment. But Ursula, I reread the book recently, so I can't remember exactly, but I think Ursula kind of uses Pin for that, because in the book she's a little bit more sexual. They definitely do that in the movie, but even throughout the whole novel she's still very overt. But anyway, so I read the book, or I finally got the book, loved it. I didn't know that they had made a movie, so I was excited. My friend worked at the library, got me a copy of it, and I loved the movie. I thought it was well done, chilling, smart. You
Hmm.
know, at that time it was definitely the slasher craze. And I think that the book didn't really, they had one moment like with Marcia, the girl. In the movie, they kind of amped it up, I feel, a little bit to like have sort of a slashery, she's being chased around the house
Hmm.
thing. I think it works. I think it's a little out of place to the overall story because they wanted to appeal to that sort of like late 80s demographic of people going out to see Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street. And, you know, I think it works. I love any moment like that, but I do know that people, like some people criticize things like that, like, oh, it's not really necessary. I enjoy it, but it is, I also think, not necessary. But that's kind of how I came into Penn. So I love VC Andrews, Andrew Niederman. You know, I've read quite a few of his books now. He went on to write like The Devil's Advocate, The Maddening, or Playmates is the book. Became a movie with Burt Reynolds. That's pretty okay too. And but Pin, I thought was an excellent movie. You know, I was surprised that it was well adapted. They removed some of the more overt incesty stuff. Again, it was nothing VC Andrews like where the brother and sister had sex, but they
Hmm.
definitely like explored each other a little. She was always taking baths in front of Leon in the novel or stuff like that. But anyway, Zena, how did you first come across Pin?
So this was one of those movies for me where I remember I told you sometimes I would have trouble sleeping. So I would always see the poster for this movie. I even remember seeing it when I was in high school, but it just looked weird, and I wasn't too sure, to be honest with you, if it was like a horror movie. It just looked weird.
Right.
So then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give it a shot. So then I actually watched it like long after high school, maybe like 6 years ago one time because it was actually streaming on YouTube. And randomly put it on. And I feel like this movie is the kind of movie where it just pretty much just confirms that a horror movie does not have to be bloody or violent. I feel like this is the kind of horror movie that will stick with you for weeks, rather if you want it or not. Just because, like, at first, I'm not gonna lie, like when they first presented, like when the first opening, you think it's gonna be something more thriller, more like goosebumps type of episode, even when you are first introduced to Leon and Ursula and the family and, their parents so strict and anal, even with that. But then I knew that I was in for a ride with the scene with the nurse. I was just like, wait a minute, like it
Right.
just changed. And it's the type of movie that obviously this isn't for everyone, but there are so many people, I can honestly say and proudly say I put a lot of people onto this movie because a lot of people never heard of it before. And I really do feel, I know people like to throw this around, but I feel like this movie is an underrated gem that really, really
Absolutely.
needs more love. So I feel like it is terrifying. It sticks with you for weeks. And even though we'll get into it, even though Leon is doing these things, these certain things, it's like you kind of feel bad for him because he can't help it. It's a sickness. So, but I do think that even with Ursula, it's just kind of like, well, unfortunately, I didn't read the book, which I feel like I should. I feel like
I
I
think you'll
need to.
enjoy it. I really do. We'll get into it, but
Okay. So even with Ursula, it's just like, you could tell that she loved her brother. And you could tell that Leon loved her. So it's just like, even when her boyfriend Stan, when he's just like, hey, there's something wrong with him, when they're having that conversation. First off, that particular shot to me, when Leon overhears them, that's a scene that really stands out for me. I mean, even beyond the nurse and Penn, but that one stands out for me because you can even tell like everyone a part of the movie, on set, they knew what they were doing. Like the cinematographer knew how to line it up perfectly. So it's just like you kind of just feel bad for him. And then you feel bad for Ursula because she even says, well, he's not hurting anybody, without her knowing about, their aunt and everything. But it's just, yeah, it's just such a weird, it's a beautiful movie. And maybe that's
yeah.
not the right word, but I feel like there's not a movie like it.
I'd say it's beautifully disturbing.
Yes.
You know, it. It doesn't shy away from those disturbing moments that are in the book either, but
Mhm.
it's beautiful. It's a heartbreaking story. I mean, you look at the way those two kids grew up, they really only had each other. You know, they
Right.
had this obsessive compulsive mother, they had this sort of emotionally distant father. They were taught, sex in a way that's non-traditional in terms of like the father didn't really shy away from discussing the lust part of it. I feel like most parents with the birds and the bees, it's sort of like this is how, this is what happens when you get married and you're adult. And the father, especially in the book, but in the movie too, played by Terry O'Quinn, who I love Terry O'Quinn. We got the stepfather,
Yeah.
he's such a subtle presence in this movie, but he is fantastic. But he
Yes.
does describe to the kids like, but there's this other part. He has no problem sharing that there's lust, that we have the need. And I'll tell you real quick, responding to what you said with you've shown people this and they've had positive reactions, that's been my experience too. I've shown people that really weren't into horror and they
Right.
enjoyed this movie so much that I was able to cheat and get them to watch a few other horror movies, like I watch like Cujo and stuff that have nothing to do with it, but I'd be like, well, there's this sort of psychological element to it. Like my friend Amy, she went on to become a therapist, so she was really intrigued by the psychological terror of it. And anyway, though, I showed some other friends this too, and they also loved it. But we were just out of college at the time, and we would joke around and be like, do you have the need? Who has the need today? So we would all be like joking around with it. And I just think it's funny that because Andrew Niederman actually went on to write a book called The Need. And
Whoa.
it's not about that. It's an interesting story too. Now, The Need, 20 seconds. The Need is a book that I think would make a really cool movie. And apparently, like, it got pushed to the side, but it's like a story about this woman. They're from a species called androgyny, which is like it's a woman, but when she hits puberty, a man, she becomes into a man, and then he goes out and has sex with women and takes their energy to make her more beautiful. But
Whoa.
it's also a really beautiful story too, beautifully disturbing. But anyway, I always think of The Need, the book, and then joking around with my friends. I'm hoping I know one of them will watch this episode. And so, Alicia, I'm asking you right now, do you have the need? But she'll laugh. But no, his performance is great, and yeah, people come into this because it's not gory, it's not gruesome, it's haunting because it deals with madness, and it is sort of a question of like, if Pin didn't exist, would Leon's madness manifested in a different way? Would he still have come out to like an inanimate object? Because I also like that they play with the notion. I would say this fits in like the sort of subgenre of evil doll movies,
Hmm.
but like in we talked about, and again, as always, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. But like we talked about with the boy, it's one of those movies where it's not really. We think it's an evil doll, or we think it's something else, and it ends up being, he's not. It's really the madness of the people around him. But
Hmm.
what do you think? Do you think that Pin had any sort of evil influence? Like when Terry O'Quinn's driving in the car and he looks in the mirror, he's clearly affected by
Hmm.
this. And on that note, too, do you think like the dad and the mom had a real effect on Pin as well as the kids?
I do think, well, at first, when I first watched the movie, first starting out, you think that, yeah, there's something up with the doll, the doll, the doll, the doll. But to be honest with you, no, I don't think that there was anything going on with the doll. And I think that even when it came with the father, I think that he was just probably feeling a little bit paranoid because what he just witnessed. You know, he's a doctor, so he probably knew, hey, there's something wrong with his son, you
Yeah.
know? So I just think that at that moment, it's just kind of like, he realized kind of what he created in a way or in his mind because he always seen Leon always seemed to be drawn to Penn even more than Ursula even when they were kids, and obviously the father saw that. So I think that just seeing that just kind of made him feel that way. And then even in the movie when um again, spoilers, when the doctor, well, his dad catches Leon in the room, with the lights off, talking to Penn. He can hear people talking or someone's voice going back and forth. He opens the door, it's his son. And so Leon probably thought that he was just disappointed that, oh, he's talking to Penn and he doesn't want me talking to him. No, like, he is an adult. He is 18 years old and he really believes that this doll is alive. Just the fact that he even said to him, go out, through the back, because he didn't want his mom seeing him.
Yeah.
So, that's what I think that it was. And I do think that with the parents, they probably suspected there was something you know, and I'm not a mom, not a parent, but I think, because you know sometimes a lot of people are just in denial, but I think that with the dad that particular night, just because what was going on, that he probably realized, yeah, like there's something wrong with him with that. And what was your other question? I'm sorry, I just talked so.
Well, you kind of answered it, because it is sort of the parents' influence. I was asking, do you think that contributed to Leon, the way he
Right.
was? But basically, that leads me to actually another question I want to ask you, which is, why do you think Leon had such an effect versus Ursula? Do you think it was mostly the schizophrenia? And I want to preface this question with mentioning the novel. I don't want to spoil it for you. But the way the novel's structured, it's all from Leon's POV. So it's very easy to slip in and out of like his madness. It's very easy to slip in and out of time. You're sort of, and it's all cyclical. Like the beginning of the book is also the end of the book, which is also the beginning of the book. It kind of goes around and
Right.
around, which knowing how everything turns out, that makes sense with how Pin and Leon sort of merge. But why do you think, and in the novel, I'm going to say too, it ends on a much more bleak thing. The movie sort of has a happy ending, as happy an ending as it's going to be for either of these siblings. But the book isn't like that. The book follows the same structure the movie does as the book, but it definitely ends a little darker. But why do you think, Ursula's development was different than Leon's?
I do think that it had to do with Leon's schizophrenia, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Because you
Um,
mentioned like how Ursula, I love how she would look to try and see the dad's lips moving, but
right.
Leon sort of accepted it.
hmm And that's true. Like, and then even with the fact that when Leon did it in front of Ursula, and she asked him like, "Hey, how did you do that?" And he's like, "Did do what? I didn't do anything." So it's just like that right there. But yeah, I do think that because obviously they both grew up in pretty much the same environment, but I do think that with Leon, that's just something that he had, whereas
Yeah,
with Ursula, she didn't.
yeah.
It's just so sad because it's just like I really do feel like it could have been prevented. Like I know it's just a movie, but it's just kind of like I'm pretty sure that even with the dad, he didn't really think it was any harm. Even with the way that he was explaining the need, I mean, that's just kind of ridiculous and sound like a
Right.
superpower or something. But with that, like I get it, but because sometimes it's probably hard to be straightforward, and maybe this is a way that they can like remember. And it's so crazy because even when they're grown up, they're still calling it the need.
Right.
Also, I'm sorry,
No, it's funny though, but it's true, and it is sort of like it's like the tale of like the boy who didn't stop believing in Santa Claus, because Pin was like their own personal Santa
right,
Claus, bringing
right,
them presents and stuff, and it's like the dangers of when do you tell your kid, hey, by the way, this isn't real, right? And he never did. He just assumed because the doctor was so emotionally distant, he just assumed they were growing up naturally.
right.
But discussing out some of the disturbing scenes too. I mean, you've got the nurse with the need, but you also have a father that's willing to perform an abortion on his daughter.
Oh my, yes, that
That's
was just
horrifying in itself. And he even asked Leon, "Do you want to stay and watch me do this with your sister for educational purposes?" I mean, it's kind of not surprising that the doctor didn't catch on because he was
right.
so technical. It's a messed up scene, though. I think I was mortified the first time.
So was I. So it's just like I kind of like blocked it out when I
Right.
watched it again last night. It's just like really, but I have a question for you, like kind of like the same thing. So do you feel like this could have been prevented for with Leon, like his situation?
I think that he would have developed the same way. I think things would have gone differently, especially if he had people that like Ursula loved him so much that she didn't want to see it, whereas the dad, I think, also loved him, but was so removed. And the mom, she always had barriers because she was afraid of dirt. I mean, she had OCD to like the medical stance of OCD. And I think that it still would have manifested. I don't know if he would have picked an inanimate object to project his own insecurities because Leon, and let's just say the performances in this movie are perfect, excellent.
Yes.
I love them. The kids, each incarnation of Leon and Ursula, I think are perfect. And I want to say I see so many movies that like don't get it right. Like my friend Danielle, we just went through all these VC Andrew adaptations on Netflix, and they would have, or on a Lifetime, and they had so many different like younger versions that didn't look like the older versions and stuff. And I'm like, this small movie in Canada, they were able to find perfect kids that like worked for each incarnation.
Right.
Anyway, but yeah, no, I think that Leon was going to end up being the way that he was. But yeah, I think it could have been prevented, but it still was going to happen in one form or another. What do you think about the scene with Marcia? Like I said, I think I love it because I love horror movies. But
Hmm.
do you think like when she's being chased around the house by Pin, do you think it works? Do you think it fits? Or do you think it's a little out of place?
I actually feel like it fits because, just to be honest, it's just such a bizarre movie. So anything can be thrown in there. I think that if he would have ended up killing her, that might have been too far because he doesn't have a reason to. I just
Sure.
think that he just wanted to scare her. At this point, he probably, well, obviously he wanted to, he had the need, but then when he
Right.
had her there, it's just like, all right, now I have to, get her out of there. Because think about it, at this point, most likely she'll never try to come back around. She'll probably even never tell anybody what happened. With her family, her friends,
Yeah.
her brother that she was talking about. So, but I have a question for you. In the book, what well, as far as it went with like with the family, well, with the father and the mom, their death, was it the same?
Well, it's okay, you don't see no, it's still a car accident. That's still the same.
Okay.
But Leon's at home with Ursula. The police come, but there's no like final confrontation with the dad, Pin, and Leon, where they're like, he's like, go home now, don't let your mom see.
Right.
So Pin isn't like slowly sitting up in the car. No, there's none of that. But it is still a car accident. There's no like the Dorothy, the aunt, that sequence and stuff, she doesn't come to live with them. It's basically like more based in a reality sense
Okay.
where Leon's like, they're kind of like, hey, we might come here and live with you, or we might take Ursula. And Leon's like, no, I'm of age. I'm going to take care of her. So I will fight you in court. And
Mhm.
so they end up not coming and stuff because the novel really, and the movie definitely does too, but the novel really is about this sort of trio, Pin, Ursula, and Leon, and how each of them sort of react. And it's interesting because you're all from Leon's point of view, who is sort of this condescending person. And really, the good side of him is Pin. If you notice, it's Pin that's always sort of like
Right.
giving him rational advice, whereas he wants to fly off the handle. And Ursula, when you're reading it, it's very obvious in the movie that she's kind of like playing along, but like, this is messed up. In the novel, for a really long time, you almost think that Ursula is accepting of Pin into adulthood like Leon because it is all from Leon's point of view. So in the movie, I love that you do really get, I really loved in the movie that you got an equal part of Cynthia Preston's Ursula. I thought she did a really nice job. I thought she was really good, beautiful, strong, vulnerable, but almost like in the novel, she's a little bit more helpless at times. Like Leon has to call for Stan on the phone and call the police, whereas she's more like something's wrong. We need to get this fixed. Ursula in the movie is like ready to go, ready to like stand up. So I really like that. But yeah, no, that's a little bit different. As far as the novel and the movie go, it follows most of the things. One other thing that's different is like Stan's leg in the he because this is written in 1980, I think, or 81. So Vietnam War had happened. Stan's a Vietnam vet, and he actually is missing his leg.
Mhm.
So instead of the novel it being about that watch, it's about his leg is like a clue to Ursula that something's because it comes off. Does that answers your question? I think
It
about the
does.
yeah.
I do have another question. Okay, with Leon and his poems,
Oh
do you
yeah,
think that he wanted to assault his sister or wanted to sleep
I
with
think it's
her?
possible. I think it's
Okay.
possible because well, that's the part in the movie that really illustrated the novel sense that like Leon is obsessed with his sister. I don't think that he's in love with her, like wants to do it with her sort of thing. Exactly, but I think that was the movie's way of really like reminding us what kind of movie we watched because the first like 20 minutes are them younger and this sort of inappropriate relationship between the brother and sister, but then they kind of grow up and it seems like they're almost normal brother and
Right.
sister. Um, Although I will say one thing missing is Ursula's sense of humor. In the novel, she has a darker sense of humor with Leon for a much longer. I feel like once the parents die, Ursula stops making those sort of jokes about the parents, like the spick and pan or the spick and span penis,
Yeah.
like they say that. the mom will only have sex with the dad if she wipes his penis with spick and span. I thought that was a really funny line. And Penn really loved that in the novel. That was one of his favorite lines. He would refer to it. That was the movie's way of being like just a reminder that there's an incesty subconscious like
Okay.
level here, which is weird because it was made at the same time as the Flowers in the Attic adaptation, and that movie also removed the sort of incesty stuff. So when you watch that movie, you wouldn't really know how the novel really gets in depth. And I think it's interesting that Andrew Niederman, who became a ghostwriter for V.C. Andrews, his movie, his first adaptation, also sort of removed that a little bit. I don't know. I guess in the late '80s, they really thought people would not be able to handle it. Again, the nurse sort of fills in that role with Ursula in terms of the like getting off with Pin sort of thing. Now, if I was just coming from the movie's point of view, I'd say, yeah, there's probably a part of Leon. I mean, it's jealousy. This
Hmm.
is his partner. This has been his partner, maybe not romantically, but he would wash her back in the book. They talked about sex. He described him having sex, and she would ask him like the sensation from his point of view. So Ursula definitely had like, and you see that in the front half of the movie, or
Right.
she's very free with her sexuality, you know. And I'm glad they didn't shy away from that in the movie because I think like it leads to that disturbing moment of the abortion sequence. I do. What about you? Do you think that Leon wanted to get it on with his sister?
I don't think so, but it was just kind of like it was weird that his poem was like that, like when he ended it and he just, when he was reading it to Stan and Ursula and he just ended it and then it was just so awkward because it's just like I understand that it's like, oh, it's just a poem. It's just like that's kind of dark and
Very dark.
gross. So,
Well,
you
his
know,
hero's name is Testes. He has 173 children. I mean, it's Leon's mind. He's a genius, but a disturbed
right.
genius, you know. And he has all the reasons to be condescending. But again, I think Pin is sort of his like mirror of like, don't be a jerk. And
Hmm.
so whenever he starts to feel that, he throws it at Pin. But I think it's interesting, and I think there's a solid commentary to be made that when it comes down to everything happens with Stan. Ursula is confronting Leon, and I think it's very interesting that Leon shows his true cowardly self and throws it all on Pin, which is so ridiculous. But in Leon's mind, you know, and that's what works in the novel too, because again, you're not completely sure how Ursula feels about Pin
Hmm.
until the very end when you're like, okay, so she's normal for the most part, you know, from
Right.
having this weird childhood too. But you know, I think it's saying about true cowardice. You know, people like that will be condescending and act above everybody because
Mhm.
truly they're afraid that everybody's gonna pull away their mask and see who they really are. And in that moment, he has no problem betraying Pin.
It's kind of sad because I kind of feel like, in a way, Leon really didn't have a chance because it's just kind of like here you have Ursula, like you said, like she's very carefree, even when she was like a child, what she was saying, how she can't wait, to do certain
Right.
things. But then you have Leon, it's like, he never had a chance, I feel, it's kind of like he had to worry about his dad and, him quizzing them randomly. And then even
Right.
with Penn and, they seem like they live someplace very isolated too.
But what if you were Ursula? You know, what if you had somebody in your life that you liked or you cared about, and you found out, oh, they like to talk to an inanimate object?
I mean, the person who I am now, we need to get this person help. Like
Yeah.
even if it were my brother, we have to get you help because I
Yeah.
love him that much. And I know that he's not hurting anyone right now. But I mean, I really think that she has to like think about it because she automatically knew when she couldn't find Stan, with that stuff, and even finding in the movie when she found his watch. It's like it things just started to come together for her. But it's like even before that, like come on, think about what happened to your aunt. It's just
Right.
weird, and even how he was acting at dinner. So it's just like, I think that you just have to be honest with yourself. And sometimes that's hard. That's hard for people to do, because she wants to protect him. She believes the best for him. It's like, it kind of reminds me of, maybe this is like a bad example, but Dexter. I don't know if you ever watched the show Dexter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so spoiler, people should have been watched the show. But,
Right.
when Debbie found out about Dexter, and it's just like, she knew what he was doing was wrong. And it's just like, I don't, what can you do though? You know?
Right.
So I mean, but even with that, like I think in Ursula's case, she was young, and she probably thought that kind of like what she said to Stan, he's not bothering anyone. Just let him read, write his poems. He can live here, he'll be fine, But it's like, what kind of life is that though? Living remotely, and it's like clearly they had enough money for them to be fine, but I don't know. It's just I do feel like it's just a very sad movie when you think about it. It does have hints of drama. It's kind of tragic, and
Well, the reason why I wanted to ask you is because I was thinking about bringing on another co-host, and I didn't know how you would feel about my friend Jeffrey here. Hi, Zena. How are you, Zena? How's it going? I think your shirt is very pretty. Sorry, I had to do it.
What are you bringing on?
I'm so glad you laughed. I'm like, oh, this could go anyway. But yeah, truthfully though, yeah, I loved the show Dexter, and I want to say like I was the whole series for me was waiting until Deb found out because I guess in those novels she found out in the first book, and I was always really curious as how the show would pull that off.
Yeah.
But I think it would be very difficult. In my family, my mom has a relative that she's had to deal with this situation. And I know it's always been really hard on her, and rightfully so, because it's kind of like she can never be like Ursula, the weak one, because she has to be the one that's sane, and it's so much like it seemed like in the novel and in the movie, Leon is taking care of her. She doesn't have to worry about anything. But Ursula is actually the strong one. She's the one that's coping and capable and is taking control of life. She's trying to make a life outside the house, getting a job at the library. She's trying to find somebody that she can care about. Because I think that the whole abortion thing in both the novel and the book slowed her down, made her reevaluate her life. Now, in the novel, she was only 14 when that happened. In the movie, she's a little bit older. But again, the performances too. David Hewlett is terrific as Leon. It's chilling. I think the ending, like we said, there's nothing like jump scare, or it has moments like that, but it's more of like questioning yourself internally. That's where the chills come from. Or it's looking at like there's disturbing moments, and I think overall the movie stayed true to the novel in that respect. Again, I think they pulled a little bit away from the Leon Ursula relationship from the novel, which wasn't overt, but it was definitely there. I think it's good for people. I think we say this a lot on this show where we kind of recommend movies that are good for like first time viewers. But like you said, I've shown people this movie that really, really enjoyed it. And it is I only happened to hear about it through that book. I told you I saw an ad in the book, through the movie, but like nobody else had ever heard of this movie. I don't remember ever seeing it at my video store, and it's always been pretty well received by critics. I think that it's a choice that people should take a look at if they like that evil doll subgenre. But again, it's like a question of what's real, what's not. You're almost waiting for Pin's head to like turn or something.
Right.
It plays with a lot of your expectations.
It's a great psychological horror movie, and it's very, very unforgettable. And honestly, even with the ending, it's still rewarding.
I think it's really rewarding. I think it's a different kind of, again, people going in expecting like knife slashing and this and that. Yeah, you're right. They're not, it's not going to give you that, but it is very rewarding. I think that's the right word to use. A rewardingly beautiful, disturbing movie that people should check out. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What are some of your favorite psychological thrillers and or creepy evil doll movies? Thank you, Zena, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at Wicked Horror, RealQueenOfHorror.com, or on her YouTube channel, Real Queen of Horror. And again, I'm Justin Steele. You can find me over at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thanks for joining me, Zena, talking about Pin.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
Me too, as always, and I'll see you next time. We'll all see you soon. Have a good one.